Good afternoon. My name is Julie Snow, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about how to make a one-year plan to pass the CPA exam. Before we get started, I would like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. Everyone is in listen-only mode except for myself and the presenter, so you can submit your questions and comments in the question box. We will be addressing all of your questions at the end during Q&A time. I'm going to try to address some of the questions right in the questions box, but for those that I am not able to address, we'll take at the end, and our instructor will address those. We have a copy of today's slides in the handout section, so be sure to download that. And then finally, this event is being recorded, and you'll get a copy of that recording within 24 hours. So keep an eye out on your email for that. Next slide, please. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our instructor. Professor Jeannie Yamamura is a CPA, MIM, PhD, as well as a Wiley instructor. Jeannie is an international consultant and educator who provides instruction and training to students in the US and around the world. Her career has spanned the professional as well as the academic worlds, including positions in public accounting, the financial services industry, government, and universities. In academia, she specialized in teaching auditing and accounting information systems and has also taught international accounting in the full array of accounting classes. Jeannie is also a Wiley instructor in the Odd section of the Wiley CPA review course. Welcome, Jeannie. I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right, thank you. So my career journey, as you just heard, has included almost every type of accounting job possible, from external and internal auditor to accounting manager to university professor. The experience most important to you, though, is my experience helping candidates successfully pass the CPA exam. I've helped hundreds of students over the years, and today I want to help you lay out a one-year plan to pass the exam. So let's get started. These are the basic steps. First, education. You need a bachelor's degree and 150 credit hours. Depending on your state, you may be allowed to sit for the exam before you have the full 150, but you normally are going to need at least a bachelor's degree. Now, I want to caution you to be careful if you sit before you have the full 150, just because the different jurisdictions have different rules about when you need to complete those classes. So you want to make sure that you know what the rules are if you do sit early. But it is a nice benefit to being able to sit while all the information is still really, really fresh and you're in the process of getting more. Next is the application, which is going to require identifying where you want to apply. Each state's rules can be a little different, as I'd mentioned, so be sure you've checked out the requirements for that state. We have a website that you can use if you want to compare a few choices. So Julie, if you could put the website link into the chat, that would be great. Remember, you're going to need transcripts before the application will be approved. Those of you in states where CPA Central processes your application need to be careful. If you apply and your transcripts do not arrive within 45 days of the application date, you're going to lose all your fees and have to pay again. A very sad prospect. So you want to also be sure to call CPA Central if you have different names on your transcripts versus on your application. You know, for example, name changes due to marriage. So, because they need to know those different names in order to link the transcripts to the application. Now, it's going to cost about $1,000 for all 4 parts. So there was just another little increase, and now each part costs $226.15. So it's about $905 for all 4. Then there also are state board fees that usually run about $100 to $150. One last comment about applications. It's been taking longer for applications to be processed due to COVID restrictions and complications. So be sure you take care of the application first. You know, you don't want to assume, start your studies and assume it won't be a problem to get the application through and then discover that it's taking longer than you think. Now, the CPA Central says that the normal time frame for processing an application is 6 to 8 weeks, but then there was a sort of notice in there, or a cautionary note that said it is taking almost, be careful, it is taking up to the full 8 weeks. So be sure you allow that much time. After the application has been processed or has been accepted, you can then schedule the dates that you want to sit. Now, you want to lay out a plan for all 4 parts, even though you're probably only going to schedule the first exam or maybe the first 2 exams. The 4th step, studying, I think that step is often the hardest. But in a 1-year plan, the good news is that it's only going to be a year. The 5th step, taking the test, that turns out to be the easiest step because you show up and you take the 4-hour exam. Then the final steps, after you've successfully passed all 4 parts, you can submit your application for licensure and become a CPA. Now, these general steps, of course, apply to everyone, but let's take a closer look now at what you want to do when you're laying out a 1-year plan. So, but first, we have a polling question for you. So, Julie, do you want to?
I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. So we would love to hear from you. Of all the steps that Jeannie just presented, what steps have you completed so far? And check off all the steps that you've completed so we can see where you all are in the process. There's the education, the application process, scheduling your exam, studying for the exam, and of course, taking the test. I don't know that I agree that that's the easiest step of the process, Jeannie, but probably the most anxiety inducing of all the steps. So go ahead and give us your answer and we'll share out these results in just a second to see where everybody is at. Okay, I'm going to close this out and share the results. Looks like about 83% of you have completed the education step. That's great. Probably the most time-consuming step of all of them. And then 41% have completed application, 24% schedule, and it just kind of goes down from there. So thank you for sharing your experiences.
All right. Moving on then, because you can sit for the exam all year long, you have the ability to set target sitting dates for each of the 4 parts within the 1-year period. Setting these dates requires thinking about the different parts and how much time you might need to study for each part. Now note, by laying out a 1-year plan, you have automatically given yourself some breathing room in meeting the 18-month requirement. All 4 parts have to be passed within an 18-month period. If you exceed the 18 months, you will have to retake 1 or more sections. The 18-month clock starts ticking on the day that you take and pass your first part. So, I mentioned thinking about the different parts and how much study might be needed for each part. This actually affects the order in which you want to take the parts, because you don't want to leave the hardest section, the one you have the most difficulty with and the one you have to study the most for, to the end. By the end of studying for a year, you're going to be getting kind of tired and you might be losing motivation. So when we're asked for recommendations on the order to take the parts in, we usually suggest the following. First FAR, then ODD, then REG, and then BEC. Why? Because FAR covers the accounting basics as well as the more complicated stuff, but those accounting basics end up being tested again in ODD, REG, and BEC. Not tested exactly, but you're expected to know them. Then in addition, FAR and ODD are usually ranked as the most difficult sections because of the large amounts of material covered, and in the case of ODD, the need to understand accounting systems, auditing, and business practices. Now, BEC has the highest passing percentage and is usually considered the easiest section. It has, however, sometimes tripped people up because it covers so many topics, even though they aren't covered very deeply. Remember, though, there isn't one right answer. You can do what works best for you. If you want to take your favorite section first to build confidence, you can do that. Just remember the 18 months. You don't want to have to take a section, even your favorite section, a second time because the 18 months was exceeded. So here again, a one-year plan works in your favor, and then you'll have 6 months for just in case. Okay, Julie, let's go ahead and do the second polling question.
All right, we would like to hear from you on what section of the CPA exam do you plan to, or maybe you have already taken first? FAR, OD, Reg, Bec, or maybe you're just not sure. Judy, I always find it really interesting to hear how people are kind of sequencing their exam parts, because we strongly recommend FAR first. It's such a mammoth section. It's a great place to start. But you know, a lot of people, they like to start with their strengths and the areas that are going to build confidence in the beginning.
Oh, absolutely. I used to have a lot of my students used to take auditing first. So who knows?
Because that was what you were teaching, right?
Uh-huh. And they passed. But
Right.
unfortunately, some of them ran into trouble later. But anyway, they started. It isn't one right choice for everybody.
Right. Well, it looks like this kind of lines up with what we generally see. Most of you, 44%, are planning to take FAR first, or you have, and a lot of you just haven't decided, which is not surprising. So thank you for sharing what your plans are with us.
All right. So now that you've figured out the order of the parts, you need to determine how much time to allow for studying. Now, we're frequently asked this question and can offer the following general guidelines based on our analysis of successful CPA Excel candidates. For FAR, 190 hours, for OD, 110 hours, for REG, 120 hours, and for BEC, 130 hours. Now, this is the time spent using what we call the core content in CPA Excel. The core content consists of watching the video lectures, reading the study guide, and completing the assessments. Now, you need to plan for this to be the minimum time that you'll need to spend, because the real answer is, it depends. It depends on how long ago you were in school, which affects how fresh the information is in your mind, and how hard you're going to have to work to remember everything. There may also have been changes since you were in school, and so the material will be new, and you might be learning some of it for the first time. So these factors can make studying take longer. Two factors in particular are going to have a big impact on how much additional time you should anticipate needing, which is what we're going to talk about next. But first, we've got one more polling question.
I think this is our last polling question. So what section of the CPA exam do you think is going to be the most challenging for you? And it's always interesting to see kind of how this lines up with answers from the previous poll question. You know, because people do either approach it as trying to get the hardest out of the way first, or trying to get what they consider the easiest, or the section that they feel the most confident in. So I'm going to go ahead and share these results. Okay, yeah, it lines up pretty well. 46% of you are thinking that the FAR section is going to be the most challenging, and kind of goes down from there. Okay.
All right. So I mentioned two factors that would impact how much additional study time you might need. The first factor looks at the study materials you plan to use. Now, I'd already mentioned the core content. So the core content consisted of the video lectures, the study guides, and the assessments. The video lectures provide the best introduction to the content presented in each lesson, and they include a substantial amount of material that you could be tested on the exam day. The study guide is like a textbook, but summarized, and it's going to reinforce and expand the lesson content. The study guide is available online in print or through ebook, and has been matched to the latest CPA exam blueprint. The assessments verify that you understand and can apply what you have learned to exam questions. This is absolutely critical because you're not tested on your memorization of the FASBs or the SASs. You're tested on your ability to take that knowledge and apply it to the exam questions. So you also would have the ability to access unlimited CPA exam practice, unlimited CPA practice exams that would be just like the actual exam as part of your assessment process after you'd finished all the lessons. Now, we have a lot of supplemental materials. The supplemental materials provide additional means to help you build and reinforce your learning if you're having difficulty, or if you simply want some more practice or more information on a particular topic. But you want to use the supplemental materials selectively and not automatically assume that you're going to use everything, because there are a lot of supplemental materials. The virtual classes are live classes where you can work on your test-taking skills and ask questions. The classes provide structure for your studies, which can help you stay on track. And one of the things that students really like about the virtual classes is, again, that ability to work on test-taking skills. So, we go through questions and we talk about words that make a difference in either a question or in the different answer choices that you're given. And, so because once you have thoroughly analyzed a question, you will know that information for the future and be able to successfully answer questions on that topic in your exam. Then, so the next supplemental material are the knowledge checks. And the knowledge checks are simply true-false questions that verify your understanding of the basic concepts in the lesson. If you don't understand the basic concepts in the lesson, it's going to be hard to then go on and apply them in the assessments. We have flashcards. Flashcards are a retention and review aid. So they can help with memorization of key steps and rules, or perhaps definitions. There are deep dive videos, and these are additional videos that may appear in a lesson that touch on areas that a lot of students have had trouble with. So, they don't appear in every lesson, but when you see them, they're going to answer a lot of questions. We have Ask an Instructor, which enables you to post questions to a mentor for that area and get quick feedback. So, getting feedback on a concept, while you're in the lesson. Gee, I don't really understand what this is, or what does this word mean, because I thought it meant that. Or even when you're taking an assessment question, I don't understand why the answer is A, because I really think B is a better answer. You can post that question to Ask an Instructor and get a response, and that will enable you to clarify that concept in your mind, and that will make your studying more efficient, because you're laying the groundwork for continued successful studying going forward. The test bank offers more multiple choice questions and TBSs to practice on. And a nice thing about the test bank is that it's a drill down test bank, so that you're working on the lesson on derivatives, one of your favorites, I'm sure. And you just don't quite get some of the concepts in derivatives, and so you want a few more questions to practice on. You can click on the test bank and it will take you to just questions about derivatives that are in the test bank. So when you have 4 or 5 weak areas that you want more practice in, you're able to select those areas in the test bank and then give yourself quizzes of questions just on that material. Then we have focus notes, and the focus notes are sort of a simplified study approach, that you could use for reference or to solve exam questions, or just for a quick review. And then finally, there is the 11th hour review, and this is a week-long review that could be completed just before you sit. and it has a completely different practice exam. So a key thing to remember is that you don't need to use all of these just because they're there. Each supplement adds more study time. So figure out which ones work best for you and then use them when you're having difficulty with a lesson, or you want more practice or information, or with the virtual classes, you like the idea of that organization, and that will keep you on track. The second factor is how prepared do you want to be when you take the exam? So the lessons are set up to require a minimum score of 75 before a lesson is considered complete. Scores below 75 indicate poor to weak understanding. You're going to need to do more work. You really aren't grasping the concepts fully, and you're not able to apply them in the assessments. True proficiency is demonstrated with scores from 85 to 94, and then mastery is demonstrated when you have scores of 95 and above. 9 out of 10 Wiley students who score 95 and above in CPA Excel go on to pass the CPA exam. The thing to remember, though, is that moving on to proficiency and mastery takes more study time. And you may not always have that amount of study time available for every lesson. We recommend that you study and practice until you get 95% and above on the assignments and the course overall. So that's a general recommendation. Realistically, though, that may not be a feasible target for everybody. You may not have the time. Certain lessons may make you crazy and you just don't get the concepts. So you need to hit 75. You need to hit that completed level as a minimum before you go on to the next assignment. It's better to complete all of the assignments than master, 60% of them and then have to sit for the exam a second time because you didn't have enough knowledge about the lessons that you weren't able to complete. If you have time at the end, by all means, after your final review, go back and bring the completed lessons up, to proficient or higher levels. But again, you may not need to stay stuck on a lesson forever until you hit mastery. Okay, so now that we have figured out the order of the parts and the study time needed, you can lay out a one-year plan. So for example, you have decided to start with FAR, which you expect to take more study time, and you think it'll be the hardest for you. So you decide to study January, February, and March, and sit at the beginning of April. Next, you're going to tackle odd. Now, odd wasn't your favorite subject, so you decide it's going to take another 3 months of study, April, May, and June, and you are going to sit at the beginning of July. Now, reg is next, and you loved tax. So you think it's going to go fairly quickly. You think you're only going to need a couple of months to study for this one. So July and August, you'll study, and then you can sit in mid-September. So that leaves BEC, and you know you're going to be tired, but you're going to stay on track, study in September, October, and November, and sit in early December, which will enable you to fully enjoy the holidays. So one more note to add here. Depending on how many sections you applied for initially, you will have to reapply for the remaining sections. So this is something to put on something to make note of in your plan. On a happy note though, reapplying for subsequent sections takes less time than the initial application. All right, now that we have your schedule squared away, let's take a look at the tools and resources that can make your studying easier and help you stay on track. So CPA Excel offers bite-sized lessons that are designed to be completed in around 30 to 45 minutes. This means that studying can be completed when you have a half hour available. This also means that the lessons have been honed down to cover key concepts in absorbable chunks. So each lesson begins with an overview, so you know what's going to be covered. So here's the overview right here in this detecting fraud lesson from Odd. So the overview is kind of provides like the basic objectives for that particular lesson. Then then the video lecture would come next, and then the study guide. And after completing those, you would be tested on your knowledge through the lesson assessment. And the lesson assessment, the assessment for each lesson consists of a set of multiple choice questions, many of which are released CPA exam questions. Now you have the ability to take notes. So for example, you could highlight key terms or concepts that were introduced that you were having trouble with, or just that you wanted to make sure you remembered for the future. So then I want you to take note of the Customize tab that appears in the upper right corner. Whoops, okay. So you have the ability to customize your lessons through the selection and addition of supplemental materials. The supplemental materials available to you include the flashcards, the knowledge checks, the slides from the video, the slides from the lecture video, and solution videos for TBSs that address material from that lesson. There are also additional learning aids that can be added to your study package. And I'd mentioned them earlier, but those were Ask an Instructor and the Test Bank. So Ask an Instructor, which you see down here, enables you to post a question to a mentor for that area. The mentor will get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. It's usually faster. It's usually under 24 hours, but we have to put 48 because we're answering questions posted by people all around the world. And so we never know what time zone they're going to be in. But again, as I pointed out before, if you have access to this particular aid, this can be so helpful because you have the question answered right there while you're there in the lesson. And because, our lessons tend to build, in order to break them down into those 30-minute chunks, we had to really, make pieces, and the pieces build and form, organized parts later, and you don't want to get messed up on a concept from this building block that you need in later questions. The test bank provides additional multiple choice and TBSs that you can use to hone your knowledge in selected topic areas. When you're in a lesson and you click on the test bank, you'll have access to additional multiple choice addressing the material in that lesson. So again, this can be useful when you're struggling with a concept and you want more practice. It's also going to make your studying more efficient because you can work on your weak areas long before you get to the exam stage. All right, the mobile app is one of our most popular study aids. With the app, a free minute will never be wasted. So the app enables you to access the recorded lesson videos and the deep dives to watch offline. So this was a big help to our students during the big power outages last year because they were able to keep on studying even though they had lost power, for their houses. I mean, obviously you had to have the ability to recharge your phone at some point, but they were able to keep on studying and didn't get completely thrown off because of all those problems. Having the test bank questions available gives you the ability to practice applying your knowledge. And I can't tell you how important this is. They never ask questions the way you think they should. Taking multiple choice questions is definitely an art and a skill that you have to work at. The last time you were expert in this area was when you graduated from college. And because we don't do that. We don't do that at work. We're not taking multiple choice questions, and we're not doing TBSs either. So it does take a little time to restore your skill level in how to read, analyze, and answer a multiple choice question and a TBS. Having the mobile app enables you to work on multiple choice questions wherever you are. So the questions, each of the multiple choice questions comes with rationales. And what the rationales do is they walk you through each of the answers and explain why A was incorrect, why B was correct, why C was incorrect, and why D was incorrect. So as I pointed out earlier, once you thoroughly understand a question, you can answer future questions on that topic. And you're going to see a lot of questions on the same topic. You're going to think, hey, I just took this question, but they will have changed it by a word or two, or possibly, flipped it around so a different answer is the correct answer. So because they have favorite topics that they like to test on in the exam. So mastering that topic by thoroughly analyzing and understanding a multiple choice question that you're taking in the mobile app will set you up to answer future questions on that topic, which you are going to run into. The flashcards, having the flashcards available through the mobile app, gives you the ability to create custom decks that you can use to study terminology or sets of rules. So for example, students often ask me about the terminology in statistical sampling, because there's a lot of terminology there, and it turns out to not be that difficult once you understand it. But initially it can feel overwhelming because you're looking at, this term and that term, and it doesn't make sense to you because you're having to remember what it means and then come up with the definition. Studying definitions through the flashcards would give you greater ability to remember and use those terms, and that would make studying for your lessons easier. The last thing is that the multiple choice questions that you take in the app get synced with the full courseware, so you get credit for this extra studying that you've done. Then the exam planner. The exam planner can be a critical part of your planning process. So with this planner, you enter the date that you want to start studying. So see here, you've got when do you want to start studying? Then when are you sitting? And you enter the date that you plan to sit. Then you can go through and identify the number of hours that you want to study. Well, actually the days of the week that you want to study, the number of hours that you want to study on those days. You can study every day, you can study 3 days. After you've entered that information, the software or the exam planner will then tell you, will give you the following information. So I entered October 13th today as the day I was going to start. And then I entered November 15th as the date I plan to sit, which is a pretty ambitious target. I'm going to study 23 hours a week because I obviously have nothing else to do. But the planner now tells me that the lessons will be completed on November 4th, and that I will then have 11 days left for review. During the review period, I'm going to take the practice exams and then use my performance on those exams to identify weak areas and maybe do a little more review in those areas. I would also have enough time if I wanted to do the 11th hour. The 11th hour, if you remember, takes a week and offers another practice exam. So that is the exam planner. And then let's see, I made a note somewhere. Well, let me just say it here. One nice thing about the exam planner is that, if you need to change the dates, you can change them, right? If something happens, I go along beautifully from October 13th to October 31st, Halloween, and then I break my leg. Well, hopefully it wouldn't be that bad, but anyway, something happens and I need to modify. So you can modify this at any time. You would just go in and change whatever you needed to change, and the exam planner would adjust, and it would still remember the lessons that you had already completed. So there is a dashboard that identifies the lessons to be completed each day. Once you have the exam planner set up, you can use the dashboard to keep track of your progress. And CPA Excel uses color codes, with green showing that you're on track and red showing you're behind. And then it gives you all kinds of statistics, such as your overall score, the percentage completed, and the number of assignments completed. Then the dashboard also includes a calendar that identifies the lessons to be completed each day. So if you actually went to this calendar and clicked on one of these boxes, it would identify the lesson. And then I think it might even take you to that lesson, but it'll identify the lesson, the lessons that are due that day. Now, my dashboard is pretty ugly. This calendar looks bad because there's all those red boxes. And that's because I've looked at every single lesson, but I haven't completed very many of them. So try to think of them as black boxes. And again, it's just showing you the lessons, the number of lessons that need to be completed. So you can look at this and get a feel for how much work you have coming up, kind of where you are in your plan, how much progress you've made. And remember, it's not going, a lesson won't be considered complete until you have until you've gotten a 75. Sorry, I've got to drink some water for a second. My goodness. All right. So continuing on, so I already discussed the fact that the exam planner can very easily be changed. You know, you can lay out a great plan, and then if life gets in the way, you can modify it. So it will adjust and provide you with a new schedule while still keeping track of the lessons that are completed. Whew, okay, whoops. Now, what about updates? Because the new standards keep coming out, it's important to know about and receive the updates to CPA Excel. The most current material is always the online material. Then there are major updates twice a year, in October for material testable in January, and in April for material testable in July. So there are also ongoing updates to add material if it's needed. So for example, if there's a new ethics pronouncement in auditing that is testable in April, they would go ahead and make an update for that. And there are constantly updates going on to correct errors or fix typos or make other changes that are needed. So you can tell that there's been an update because you're going to see a message pop up asking you to accept the new content. Now, one thing to keep in mind, when two sets of material are available, you will only see the new material if you have set your test date in the appropriate time frame. So for example, there are a lot of SASs, remember those are the auditing rules, there are a lot of SASs that will become testable January 1st of 2022. So as a result, there is this massive update that is going to be released pretty soon. It's going to be released in October in ODD. And so those students who are planning to sit in 2022 have to be sure to enter a sitting date in 2022, because otherwise they won't see those lessons. They won't see the changes and the updated lessons. The students who are planning to sit in October, November, December of this year need to leave their sitting date in 2021 so that they're not switched to that new material. So that is something that you have to be aware of and make sure that you do to avoid looking at, well, to ensure that you're looking at the right material that's going to be on your exam. Then we have a big change that is around the corner. So I don't know how many of you have heard about the CPA Evolution, but the AICPA and NASPA have decided that the CPA exam needs to be completely overhauled and revised. So, and they're planning to roll out this new testing strategy in January of 2024. That's the plan. We're not sure they're going to make it, but that is the plan. Now, in this, under this new testing structure, there are foundation courses, and then there are special, not foundation courses, but there's a foundation sections, and then specialization sections. And what you will be required to do in the exam is you'll be required to sit for all 3 of the foundation sections, and then you'll get to select one of the specialization sections. So the foundation sections include accounting and data analytics, and that's kind of like the old financial, but I think there's some managerial thrown in there, and then there's a lot of data analytics that's being included in there. And then the second foundation section is audit and accounting information systems, and this is the old auditing, plus they took information about accounting information systems from BEC and merged those 2 into this new foundation section. And then the last foundation section is tax. And tax, at least, is relatively straightforward. It's pretty much the Internal Revenue Code. Then for your specialization sections, you will get to choose from business analysis and reporting. And so that is really financial, but with more complex and sort of expanded topics, additional data analytics, but more complex issues than were covered in the foundation course. Information systems and controls is another specialization area. And that is pretty new. I mean, it does take a lot of information. A lot of the topics did come from the old BEC, but then they have really expanded this. And this is where they put those new SOC reports, those SOC reports on service entities. So I'm talking about if you are a company and you are using a payroll service, the payroll service is being provided by what is known as a service organization. And the SOC reports were audit reports of these service organizations. So that's where they put those. And in fact, I think information systems and controls includes how to audit those service organizations. And then the last specialization area is tax compliance and planning. And that is expanded tax topics, plus that's where all of the planning has gone. So they've got planning for tax planning for individuals, for business entities, as well, let's see. Yeah, for individuals and for business entities. So, and then some additional compliance areas, and again, the more complicated ones. But that's coming around the corner. And so these changes provide an additional incentive to you to develop and complete a 1-year plan to pass the exam, because you have 2022 and 2023. So plenty of time to develop and implement your plan. Oh, one other thing, they will be providing transition rules for the changeover. So you'll retain credit for parts that you passed before 2024. We just don't know what those rules are yet. Now, to help you get going on your plan, Julie is going to tell you about an easy way to get started.
Well, we wanted to be sure you are all aware that we offer a 14-day free trial of the Wiley CPA review course. All of the tools that are listed on the screen are provided in the course, and you get access to about 40% of the content that's in the total course. So you get a really good sample, and you can really start to dig into some of those lessons, experience the video lectures, the study text, the multiple choice questions, and even task-based simulations. So I'm going to go ahead and share a link to the free trial in the chat box right now. And we'd encourage you to go out and register for that and take a look. And one of the things I really love about the free trial is that you can go ahead and set up your own personal exam plan using the planner. So I know, Jeannie, you talked a lot about study hours and sequencing your exam parts and that sort of thing. And the exam planner will really guide you through those steps to set up an exam plan and show you how many hours a day you need to plan on studying. So I really recommend you take a look at that.
Okay, so with that, we have time for our Q&A. So did we have any questions, Julie?
We sure do. This is my favorite part. I would say a lot of you have already asked a lot of great questions, and we're going to be taking questions for the next 15 minutes. So please continue to post your questions in the question box, and we'll answer as many of them as we can. If there are any that we don't have time to answer today, we'll be following up by posting answers on our Facebook page. So if you would please go ahead and follow us on Facebook, and you'll get access to lots of great resources as well as answers to all the questions that we answer today. Okay, Jeannie, you ready for a few questions?
Yes, I am. Hopefully I have answers.
Okay. So one of the first questions came from Katie, and it sounds like she is actually an instructor, a CPA prep course instructor, and she's looking for advice and recommendations on how to keep your students motivated. She says that her students tend to struggle after about 3 to 4 months. They get kind of burnt out with all the study hours, and they just sort of run out of motivation. So how do you kind of push through and motivate to get over that hurdle?
Yeah, it can be hard because remember I'd said studying, I think, is almost the hardest part because, you just keep working. But things that can help are, and sounds like maybe she's running a review class, because
Yeah.
working with other people to study, maybe, and maybe, and I don't know how much time she has available to do these kinds of things, but possibly you could add little games of multiple choice question games, or because I used to do Jeopardy. I used to do a Jeopardy game where I would have different questions in the Jeopardy boxes, and for the different topics, and you can set it up so that if you were studying for FAR, you could set up questions here and there, but sometimes just making a little, having things to look forward to make a little fun along the way might help if she's able to engage with them in person or in a group setting. And then another thing is that I really think laying out this plan and being able to see that you're making progress will help. Because yes, you can feel bogged down, but if you can see that you're making progress, I think that might enable you to take like one more step, open one more lesson, read one more study guide. Possibly that might help. And then the last sort of suggestion is just that, for everybody, studying is not a marathon where you sit for 4 to 6 hours and you just try and cram as much as possible in your brain. They've got all this research now that shows that the way you get information to stick, the way you get information to be really understood and to stick in your brain is to do it in shorter sessions and to take walks, talk to other people about those concepts, go swimming, but break it up and try to store the information in as many different ways as possible. So not just, not only the video lecture, but taking notes, writing, practicing on the questions, talking to someone, sharing information, explaining how to, explaining a multiple choice question to someone else. So those things can make the information stick, and they might be more fun than just trying to sit there and in these long study sessions, which really aren't going to be as effective as you would like.
Yep. Okay. Next question. Does the study material for the CPA exam change yearly? What study material do you recommend the most?
So to answer that question, I have to go back to the CPA exam itself. So everybody's familiar with the blueprint, right? The blueprint tells you what's going to be tested on the exam. I mean, sometimes it's a little general, but it does go through all the topics for each section on the exam. And the blueprint does change, right? The blueprint does change because new standards can be issued and changes can occur. So The study materials change when the blueprint changes, and the study materials change when new FASBs, SASs, as new material becomes testable, we have to update the study materials to reflect that new material. So those SASs that I was talking about, this is SASs 134 to 140, those all become testable January 1, and that's why they've been making this massive effort to update all of the lessons in auditing for those changed or for those new SASs. So I guess the short answer to the question is yes, the study material gets updated all the time. But again, we do two big updates, one for the July 1, testable material, and one for the January 1 testable material.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This next question is from Veronica, and this is a great question.
Mm-hmm.
What if you pass 3 sections prior to 2024 date, prior to the big exam changes that are coming, but you must sit for one last section in 2024?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how that would work? I know we're still kind of learning how all these things are going to work, so we might need to.
And I really don't know, but I do know that they have told us that you will be able to retain your 3 parts. You will have to do 1 additional part, and you will be selecting from the from the new choices that are available. You won't be able to continue testing out of the old stuff. But how they're going to do it, that is I have no idea, and it's going to be complicated because I don't know if you could tell when I was explaining what was going on, but they've taken BEC apart. They've taken BEC apart. They put some of it with auditing in the core. They put some of it in a specialization area. They took the managerial and cost and moved it into what used to be kind of the old FAR section. So if the last section that you needed was BEC, I'm not exactly sure how they would do that. But it's a really good question.
I think I just try to get all those sections done before January 2024.
Yes,
and,
a 1 year. We got to stay on our 1 year plan.
Yeah. Okay, question from Daniel. He says, I've been out of school for a long time and I'm having to take a long time to become proficient in the lessons. What do you suggest would be the best way for me to study? I already passed he already passed the BEC section and he's currently studying for reg, but it's just taking so long. And he says, I'm not a normal candidate. I don't know that there really is a normal candidate.
Actually, you are. Yeah, no, actually you are a normal candidate, because I have students all the time who have been out of school. In my odd virtual series, I always ask people, so when did you graduate? And I get answers like 2001, 2003, I've had 1990 something. So you are a normal candidate. But you're right, it does take longer because you haven't looked at this material in forever, right? And then some of it might have changed. So what I can tell you is that you have to, as you're going through these, you're hopefully getting a feel for how you learn best. Now, BEC had a lot of topics but that weren't covered at a very deep level. The sections that you're moving into now are probably going to take a little bit longer to study for, because they build, the concepts build, and then and there's more integration. With BEC, there was business law over here, and there was, managerial over there, and there wasn't a lot of integration between the two. But in reg, there is integration. You learn about, there's individual taxation, there's business entity taxation, but you have to learn all those concepts for individual taxation in order to figure out what an individual's tax is, and and therefore whether they need to make estimated tax payments or something. So it is going to take a little bit longer, and maybe what you need to think about doing in reg is figuring out how to keep the information fresh that you've already studied. So maybe you could do little mini quizzes. You could set up little mini quizzes in the test bank or something. But but there's already a lot of assessment stuff in there. But if you felt like you were losing some of the definitions or some of the terminology, you could set up little mini quizzes to just sort of give yourself weekly or something that might help you to keep that fresher in your mind. And remember, you're dusting off old pathways and you're building new ones, and that's just going to take a little time. But it is so doable, because I have people all the time who have been out of school forever and they successfully make it through the exam. So you're going to do a great job.
A question from Emily. When should I start the whole process if I'm currently a freshman in college?
Oh, Emily, you are so on top of things.
Yeah, good for you.
So, you're probably not going to be doing much until the earliest would be your senior year. Now, one of the things you might consider, though, Emily, if you know that you like accounting, right? If you already know that, although I don't know if you've taken any accounting classes yet, but you can get CPA Excel when you are in your classes, and use the resources in CPA Excel, to have practice questions to study for, when you've got an exam in intermediate or whatever. So you can have that material available to you. And what it would also do, it would enable you to get practice in exam questions before you hit the exam. So that's a possibility. As far as actually doing anything like applying, it's way too early. You could, if you wanted to lay out a really long plan, you could lay out your 1-year plan for after you graduate and plan, because the best time, well, after you graduate and you have the 150, because the best time to sit is right after you've completed all the classes. Remember, I'd said before that when you graduate from college, you are a test taking expert. So that's the best time to sit for the exam. So if you have the ability, or just maybe as a thing that you would like to do, you can lay out your 1-year plan for as soon as you've graduated or you've completed the 150, depending on the requirements of the jurisdiction that you're planning to sit in.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. We're just getting tons of questions, which is
This
great.
is great. Thanks,
And
everybody, for all your
I want
questions.
to remind everyone that, for whatever questions we don't get to today, we will follow up with you and we'll post the answers on the Facebook page. So be sure to take a look at that. The next question is from Janum. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The question is it confirmed about the transition phase? I think what he's asking is it confirmed about the transition to the new CPA exam, the CPA Evolution? Is it definitely happening?
That's a really good question, and it's one that I can tell you that the AICPA and NASBA have said this is what is going to happen, and they have been very busy. They just issued a model curriculum, identifying how they're planning to test or how they would like people to be learning the different topics that are going to be covered in the new exam, and what kind of class structure they would like colleges and universities to have in order to give students the knowledge to take the new CPA exam. That said, universities typically take a long time to come up with big curriculum changes and to design new classes. And so I know that, so I don't really have a definitive answer, other than I can say that the AICPA and NASBA have said, yes, this is what we're going to do. The people who are going to be providing the students for the new CPA exam, the universities, are not as confident. So.
Yeah. Okay, one more question, and I think this is a good one. We have a good answer to this one. It comes from Judith, and she's saying, I would like some study buddies to see if I can boost my studying ethics. And Jeannie, maybe you could talk a little bit about our Facebook study groups. Are you?
Oh, I'm not familiar with those, but
Okay.
so
Well,
you go ahead, but
yeah.
those are great. And I'm so glad you're looking for study buddies, because it really will help.
Yes, Judith, if you are a Wiley CPA review course customer, you have access to our Facebook study groups where you can meet a ton of people who are just actively studying and asking and answering questions. This is a great platform for you to enter to meet other people who are studying at the same time. Of course, you're going to meet people in the Wiley CPA review course as well because we have discussions in the course, but those are a couple of opportunities that you'll have.
I can also say that in my odd virtual classes, sometimes people have reached out, some of the people attending those have reached out to each other to say, hey, let's form a study group. So
Right.
That's another way to meet people.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation today, Jeannie, and for all of the questions. And we do acknowledge that we didn't have time to answer all of your questions, but please, again, follow us on Facebook and we'll get answers posted to everything just as soon as we can. Have a great evening and thank you for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.